My job has sent me out once again, this time to the great state of Minnesota, St. Paul to be exact. It was a short trip out here in the state of 10,000 lakes, but I had numerous opportunities to capture quite a few trains around the area. Of course, the first train that I captured happened to have CSX power, let alone an SD70 Mac on the point. CSXT 4540 is leading UP train ORPTS, a loaded coke train out of Roseport, Minnesota, heading for Chicago to be handed off to CSX. Who would have thought that my home railroad in Georgia followed me all the way to Minnesota? But hey, I'll take it. They stopped just south of downtown next to another train. I found a neat shot going across the Mississippi River, but this was as far as they ran. The following day, though, I somehow managed to come across CP 7021 unassigned at Canadian Pacific's St. Paul Yard. The 7021 is known as the Desert Sand Unit, supporting the Canadian and US military operations, and is one of many specially painted units that CP had recently released. It was originally an SD90 43 Mac, now classified as an SD70 ACU. Although I wasn't able to get this unit in action, it was still neat to come across. Later that night, I snagged my first ever Canadian Pacific train on CP trackage. This is Canadian Pacific's River Subdivision, running between St. Paul and River Junction in La Crescent, Minnesota, right along the Mississippi River. I was swapping out a crew as CP Train 581 speeds westbound through the control point at Blackbird East. Now I have been on every single Class 1 railroad in the US. Then the next morning, I set out right at sunrise towards the city of Hastings, seeing that Amtrak's eastbound Empire Builder was in St. Paul. Hastings wasn't too bad of a drive from my hotel. The town was nice and quiet during the brisk morning hours. CP has an active freight depot and a small yard here. The drawbridge going across the Mississippi River is also still in operation, but usually raises during the barge shipping season periods. A pair of searchlight signals guard the control point at Hastings. A local job had just come on duty, using an old GP38AC number 3018. As the sun tries to pop out, CP Train 280 makes noise as they cross the Mississippi, with CP AC44CW9779 at the lead, and CSX ET44AH 3357 trailing behind. Train 280 is a daily, mixed manifest freight train out of St. Paul heading for Bensenville, Illinois. They were running mid-train DP power on this one, with CP SD30C Eco 5024 and CP AC44 CWM 8054. I've never seen a standard cab locomotive running mid-train before. That was a first for me. As another nice surprise, there was even a caboose on the rear. There was a nice dead moment for about an hour and a half, until Amtrak Empire Builder Train 8 was speeding through control point Vermillion heading eastbound for Chicago. On a nice, chilly morning on February 7th, I'm traveling eastbound on US Highway 14, seeing CP Local Train B24 on the old Dakota, Minnesota and Eastern's Waseca Subdivision. I made it into the town of Owatonna, Minnesota to catch them going by as they approached the State Avenue grade crossing. Later that afternoon, I arrive in Wayzata, Minnesota, as a little snowfall starts to pick up. Everything is quiet, with Lake Minnesota frozen on ice, the model garden train layout turned off, no boats in the dock, and ice fishers out on the water, which I found interesting. A clear signal is lit on BNSF's Wayzata Subdivision for a westbound train. I had originally set out to hopefully catch an empty grain train out of Minneapolis, but this manifest freight train showed up first. led by BNSF ES44DC 7873 and BNSF SD70 Mac 8985 trailing behind. After they passed, my gut told me to move locations. But of course, it was right as the grain train was coming up on me did I decide to move. Sorry about all of the sudden camera movements. I didn't have any time to set up my tripod for my camcorder, so I had to do everything handheld. I was attempting to get a picture of the train from my DSLR camera, but of course, that didn't go accordingly. FXE SD70ACE 4036 leads train X-CSXBEN9, an empty grain train from the CSX in Chicago bound for Benson, Minnesota, roughly over 100 miles from here. Seeing a pair of Mexican units this far north was something that I had to see. This was something totally worth coming out for. Well, I gotta kick myself in the butt for that move. When you see a clear signal, stay put. And I obviously didn't listen to my gut. I am in the process of trying to catch up with it and to attempt to get a shot of it. Those camera movements that I was doing when the engines were passing, I was trying to get my DSLR set up and the photo didn't take. And plus, being that the camera is so freaking big, you know, I'm trying to, at the same time, trying to keep up with the video. I was really not hoping on chasing this train, but here I am doing it anyway, just to get a shot. I'm sure it'll be well worth it though, but the light is quickly fading, so I'm hoping we'll be able to get ahead of it. And so, here I am, chasing this train west on probably one of the worst highways possible. It was heavy with traffic, with a wall and a median, and no passing lanes in sight. They kept on getting ahead, while I was continuing to fall behind. I don't know why I kept going, but I somehow caught up to the head end, and was then relieved when I heard the dispatcher say this.
Howard Lake for 1, please.
Howard Lake for 1. Alright, roger that.
I then arrive in the town of Waverly over 25 miles later, as the Mexican pair heads toward the Howard Lake sighting not too far west from my location.
that worked out pretty perfectly. Literally as I just pulled into Waverly, I was able to set up my tripod, got a good video, ran and got my DSLR, and I got the shot. That's all that matters, and yes, it is cold, as you can tell. There's snow on the ground. As we heard, they were meeting in eastbound just west of here, so we'll wait here and see who this eastbound is.
As the sun starts to set for the day, there was just enough light as I waited for BNSF 7227 East. Now this was worth the extra trip. An ex-Burlington Northern GP39M in Cascade green paint was in the consist of this manifest freight train heading east towards Minneapolis. With it getting dark and traffic being a nightmare, I wasn't too worried about getting them again, but I did end up heading back east after this train. Next morning, where it was a whopping -10 degrees outside, I pulled off at Cologne, Minnesota, finding the Twin Cities and Western Railroad evening job tied down. GP20C 2004 was on the point, and GP39-2 2300 was trailing behind. A crew would come out and get this train later in the day. We now skip ahead over 11.5 hours later. CP Train 197 is seen leaving Minneapolis city limits on the Paynesville subdivision, about to pass through Humboldt Yard. Train 197 is a daily intermodal and mixed manifest freight train running out of St. Paul, traveling westbound across the border to Calgary, Alberta, Canada. I was just passing through this area and happened to stumble upon this train at the right time. On the 9th, I made a visit to the Indian Mounds Regional Park in St. Paul, where it overlooks CP's St. Paul Yard, BNSF's Dayton Bluffs Auto Ramp, and UP's Hoffman Yard. And lastly, during the early morning hours on February 11th, I had just left Marquette, Iowa, and hopped across the river to hopefully capture something in Wisconsin. It turned out I had just missed this westbound BNSF train passing through the town of Prairie du Chien, so I played catch-up to get ahead of them along Wisconsin Highway 35. I apologize about the image quality. I was still trying to figure out how to use my new iPhone. This was shot in 30 frames per second. Seeing this CP SD70 ACU in the consist, this was one I had to capture. BNSF 8151 West, the train I'm currently pacing, is meeting BNSF 8092 East outside of Eastman, Wisconsin. With the train traveling at about 45 miles an hour, I got ahead to the next accessible grade crossing in the town of Ferryville, Wisconsin. The lighting wasn't great, but you'll be able to see the snow that's picked up by the train. This is the BNSF Aurora Subdivision, a part of the Northern Transcon route running between Chicago, Illinois and Seattle, Washington. Just like the Southern Transcon, a majority of the traffic is mainly intermodal, but quite a few manifest freight trains run on this route as well. I got ahead of them again, finding a better location with the streetlight shining right on the tracks as they pass through the small town of Genoa. eastbound Z train was lined behind them, showing up about 10 minutes later. Although this train has high priority, they can't go as fast compared to the Southern Transcon, since they're on all kinds of twists and turns across the northern mountains. The maximum track speed through this area is set to 60 miles an hour. I then proceeded west into the city of La Crosse, surprisingly finding a BNSF local on the Track 76 branch line heading towards the main line. They had just finished working at the brewery. I was playing leapfrog, going from crossing to try and capture them. BNSF Bluebonnet GP50 3167 was leading 2 tank cars, and BNSF GP 39-3 2606 was pushing on the rear. This local job runs daily and only works at night, hence the exempt signs on all of the grade crossings for motorists during the day. Not a whole lot of people get to see this job in action, since they work between the hours of midnight and 3 a.m. For me, it was another one of those right place at the right time kind of deal. My last capture before I went back home to Georgia ended up being the Twin Cities Metro Light Rail system, with the southbound train arriving and a northbound train departing the Mall of America station in Bloomington, Minnesota. It's pretty uncommon for me to find a grade crossing serving local transit. I had to at least capture them on video before I left. Thanks for watching today's content. Make sure you hit that like button below, and please subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't already. Also double check and make sure you have that notification bell turned on. See you next time from Bloomington, Minnesota, along the Twin Cities Metro Light Rail Blue Line.